Chapter 378, The Show Begins. With a black crown and a solid suit of armor, Klein stood in the doorway, attuned himself for a few seconds, and took a step forward. His seemingly physical body silently passed through the door and entered Capham's villa. The first thing that met him was a spacious hall with lots of chairs and clothes racks, and behind it was a magnificent hall with gold as the main color theme. There was no ceiling, only a dome reaching 3 stories high. A giant crystal chandelier hung down, and on each petal was a pearly white candle. Through a thick, heavy door to the left of the hall was an elegant and exquisite dining room. The fragrance of roasted meat was the richest inside, concealing the smell of alcohol and other food. Klein was in no hurry to enter the dining room. He partially circled the exterior first, occasionally reaching out his hand to pull on the grayish-white gas pipes. It appeared as if he was experimenting with his physical strength after carrying the Black Emperor card to see how much of an impact he had on the real world. While he was a seer and clown, Klein's spirit body only had an intuition ability that was separate from divination. He possessed only 2 spell-like powers, which were to directly attack the soul and to freeze the target through contact. Once he advanced to the magician sequence, even if Klein didn't rely on the beyonder powers of his physical body, he could still use paper figurine substitutes and air bullets in his spirit body state. In addition, he began to be able to possess others and gain basic control of the target. Augmented by the Black Emperor card, the strength of his spirit body increased and the number of items he could carry increased. His spell-like powers, which could directly attack souls, evolved into a specter's shriek. It produced sound waves that were inaudible to humans but capable of damaging the souls of all living beings in the area, also known as soul bodies. Similarly, the frozen effects derived from contact was clearly strengthened. After confirming everything, he found the corner of a wall and penetrated it to enter the dining hall. Then, suppressing all his emotions, he swept his eyes across the long table. The scene of Harris in his white wig, Katie in her thin blouse, Parker with his aged face drinking red wine, and the slightly plump Capham slicing his rib-eye steak caught his eye. Klein retracted his gaze quickly, not daring to look too much, lest the few Beyonders would discover him via their spiritual perception. With the help of the spiritual glows from the male and female servants standing around him, that is, the color of their auras, he carefully circled around the dining room and figured out the exact layout. For example, the size of the dining room was equivalent to the total area of his living room, dining room, and activity room. Another example was that there was a fireplace that burned with charcoal. It warmed the entire room via a pipe. There were 16 elegant gas lamps, and their lighting mixed together, making the room appear like it was daytime. Across from the fireplace was a wall which had hanging picture frames. There were sketches and oil paintings, all works of famous artists. That bearded Belize isn't here. He should be changing shifts at the basement. For a Beyonder to be willing to do such menial work, Capham is definitely not involved in a simple matter of human trafficking. Klein thought for a few seconds, then he leaned against an oil painting of the sunset. He reached his hand into his body and unscrewed a translucent brown bottle's cap. It was the biological poison bottle. The reason why he paid so much attention to the time and chose to arrive at dinner time was because, at this very moment, the main figures were gathered here in the most orderly manner. It was the most advantageous for him to use the biological poison bottle. And with the tightly shut doors and windows during early winter, it allowed the effects of biological poison bottle to be more effective and have faster effects. In addition, Klein didn't soak the biological poison bottle to concoct the prophylactic drug before he came. He was currently in his spirit body state, so he wasn't afraid of biological poisons. With his spirit body's concealment and containment, he stood there silently and patiently admiring each and every one of the elegant wall lamps which were connected to the grayish-white gas pipes. Quickly, the odorless poisons swiftly emanated outwards. Harris, with his white wig, sliced up a deep-fried dragon-bone fish, dipped it in black pepper sauce, and stuffed it into his mouth. Chewing and swallowing, he picked up the faintly golden champagne that was bubbling like a string of beads and took a sip in a good mood. He couldn't help but think of the entertainment that he would be experiencing that evening, the joy of a stubborn girl being conquered by him. This affected his appetite and made him unable to concentrate. Katie didn't get the servant to help her slice the roasted chicken. She was burying her head, holding a knife and fork, and like doing a precise dissection, she quickly divided the chicken into several pieces. They were all almost the same size. As Parker sampled the red wine and ate the stewed lamb, he would occasionally chat with Capim, who was sitting at the head of the table, and was considered as a guest that didn't sully the title. The dinner proceeded in an orderly manner, and finally, Capim put the last piece of beef into his mouth. He smiled at the three Beyonders and said, "Mr. Harris, Ma'am Katie, and Mr. Parker, tonight's desserts are from La Borrega's head chef. There are 3 kinds: fruit caramel pudding, cream shortcake, and the carrot cake." Harris, who had always been cold, nodded slightly. "We love dessert so much in this country." As soon as he finished his reflection, he saw Capim raise his hand and scratch his cheek before scratching again. "It's a little itchy," Capim smiled apologetically. Before he could finish his sentence, he couldn't help but scratch one more time, leaving a clear, bloody mark on his face. The bloody mark quickly swelled up, and his skin turned translucent. One could even see yellowish pus inside. "It's really a bit itchy," Capim smiled again. He scratched the original spot again, but due to using excessive force, the swelling caused the translucent skin to split open, and pus with a nauseating smell sprayed out. Harris narrowed his eyes and shot to his feet, looking around warily. "Ha-ha-te. Ha-ha-te-ha-te." At that moment, he heard exaggerated laughter, and his body suddenly tensed up. He saw a male and female servant holding onto their bellies, laughing out loud. They laughed so much that they couldn't even straighten their backs. Tears flowed out from their laughter caused the room to turn completely silent. Like a chain reaction, the rest of the servants fainted or vomited yellow-green liquid, continuously without end. None of them were spared. Bam! Katie flipped the dining table, letting the gold-plated cutlery and leftover food and wine to spill onto the floor. She had a revolver and a soft black whip in her hands. Parker stood up as well, but his mind appeared adrift. He looked at Capim, crying miserably for help as he kept scratching and forcefully tore off a few pieces of flesh. For some baffling reason, he felt that the other party's ugly and disgusting appearance was quite the fine sight. At that moment, Harris realized that he was a little out of breath and realized that the room was probably filled with poison. He growled, "Hold your breath." Parker opened the door. "Katie, follow me to find the intruder." At this moment, Harris was grateful that the dinner had been enjoyed with Capim, and there were quite a few attendants around. These ordinary people's ability to resist poison was far inferior to Beyonders. The fact that they showed signs ahead of time had allowed them to detect that something was amiss even before the poison had reached the deepest part of their bodies. Parker, who has the lowest sequence, should be the one with the most severe symptoms among us. Harris suddenly had this thought. Creak! As Parker opened the door to ensure that the dining room was no longer sealed, Harris, relying on his spirit vision, discovered an illusory figure quietly fleeting around. The figure wore a thick and imposing black armor and a pitch-black crown on his head. A mask of the same color covered his face, making him look like a king from the spirit world. It was none other than Klein. Harris raised his right hand and pointed at the black figure that couldn't be seen by ordinary people. He chanted in ancient Hermes, "Imprison." All of a sudden, the black figure's surroundings turned viscous, as though it had transformed into a giant amber or produced a sealed, transparent wall. The figure was rooted to the spot, hardly able to move. Katie had taken aim long ago, and she pulled the trigger. They worked well together. With 2 bangs, the light golden bullet, filled with strange patterns, penetrated the viscous air and hit the black figure. The bullet pierced through and struck the wall opposite. The black shadow self-ignited, reduced to a roughly cut paper figurine. Within the pale golden flames, the paper figurine was quickly reduced to ashes. Puh! With a strange, crisp snap, the light from the 16 elegant gas lamps and the fire burning quietly in the fireplace suddenly lit up, leaving Harris, Katie, and Parker with only a brief flash of red before their eyes. Soon after, all the flames were extinguished, leaving the dining room illuminated via the human height street lamps outside the window and the crimson moonlight shining through the layers of clouds. It made the place abnormally dark and silent. Harris and the others, once again, relied on their spirit vision and spiritual perception to search for the ghostly intruder. At the same time, he realized that the poison wasn't showing its effects fast enough. It wouldn't really flare up until he finished the enemy. Therefore, he paid attention to the movement at the entrance of the basement. He pointed at the door again and said in ancient Hermes, "Confinement." The entire dining room suddenly froze, as if there was an additional layer of an invisible wall that even spirit bodies couldn't penetrate. Harris wanted to make it impossible for the intruder to escape. "I've found you." Wielding the revolver in one hand and the whip in the other, Katie noticed a black figure floating in the air. A strange light flashed in her eyes, and before she could attack, her mind buzzed as if someone had struck her head with a wooden stick. She felt as if she had encountered an indescribable shriek. A few drops of sticky blood slowly dripped from the tip of her nose. Harris only felt slight dizziness, while the symptoms of shortness of breath seemed to worsen. Parker, the weakest of them, was seeing stars, and his steps became unstable. Suddenly, someone patted Parker's shoulder. A cold and gloomy feeling gushed over, causing him to freeze on the spot. It was as if he was completely covered in ice, and the cold moisture seeped into his bones. A familiar, deep voice sounded in his ears. "Imprison." Parker was instantly trapped by the transparent wall that imprisoned the door. However, Klein didn't possess him and went straight through instead, avoiding the effects of Harris's spell in a timely manner. Harris narrowed his eyes and waved his right hand. "Release."